can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Mike Krass. He is co-founder of MKG. You can check him out at mkgmarketinginc.com. And Mike, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, one of my favorite ones was with Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey helps pair agencies with private equity. He helps sell agencies. He's got the Second Bite podcast. I've listened to a lot of his episodes, maybe all of them, like at this point, but I talks about the Second Bite because, as you know this, because you've actually helped people through a process and helped build up their company, which we'll talk about, to sell. But sometimes they'll sell the private equity and then private equity sells again. And sometimes those founders make more in the second bite than they do on the first bite. So he talks about the agency space, valuation space, M&A space. So that was a really good one. Another good one was Vern Harnish. Mike and I met through EO and part of Entrepreneurs Organization. Vern Harnish started Entrepreneurs Organization, and it was a really good episode. He's got a great book, Scaling Up, and that was a very fascinating episode as well. Check out more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast, and we do the accountability, the strategy, and then the full execution. So kind of Mike, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, but most importantly, run their business and worry about those things. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past 15 years to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I am super excited to introduce Mike Krass. He's the founder of MKG Marketing. That's an over decade-old digital marketing agency for SaaS and cybersecurity businesses. He has a special, I don't know if you call it a talent, but a special skill. He's actually a pilot also. So, Mike, I'm excited to dig in. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, excited to be here. Let's take off.
Exactly. Just start us off with, tell people about MKG and what you do. And as you do that, there is a video piece. I'm going to poke around MKG website so people can check it out. So talk about MKG and what you do.
Absolutely. So we actually just celebrated our 13th year in business this July, here in July of 2024. And I always like to say that we are like a cat, and we are currently on our fourth life at the moment. The first life was what I called anything for money. If you had money, we were the marketing agency for you, which is hilarious because marketing agencies are usually supposed to help you with positioning and messaging. And that message is about as unspecial as you can possibly get. From there, we became more of working with just technology businesses in general. And then the life that we're on right now is focusing more on software and cybersecurity businesses. So cyber or software businesses, whether they're startups, kind of mid-market, or even enterprise. We have a few publicly traded businesses in our portfolio of clients. They usually come to us looking for a couple things. They say, hey, our paid media campaigns aren't working. They're not generating the right amount of awareness. We don't know how to measure things. We're not getting anything down funnel. Like, we need you to kind of fix the paid machine. Help us with that. The other thing that they come to and they ask for is on the inbound side. So from an SEO standpoint, what kind of content do we need to be producing? What does that content calendar look like? How should we be optimizing it and distributing it? Should we hire a backlink building agency? Which our universal answer is always no, don't do that. In fact, if you read the Google Webmaster Guidelines, it says that paying for any sort of backlinks, which you pay an agency is technically paying for them, is actually a violation of their policies. So we've got a lot of points of view and opinions there, but the bulk of our work, like I mentioned, is focused on ads, SEO, and different components of what goes into those two programs.
Talk about niche for a second. I have found sometimes the agency, it's scary for them to proclaim a niche, like they'll lose out. Talk about your journey a little bit and any points that, I don't know if it was hard for you or scary at any points to actually proclaim, okay, we're going to help SaaS and cybersecurity businesses.
Well, first of all, it is scary, right? You're saying there's all these other clients that could be mine out there, but I'm going to tell them that I'm not for them. Right? Like, what if you get into the what if game? What if like one of them just randomly wants to hire? I can tell you right now, if they haven't hired you already, they're probably not going to randomly generate this idea that they want to hire you. We've not experienced that ourselves. So I'll tell you a story, and I'm going to focus on cybersecurity. And cyber is not a huge industry. If you look it up, there's something like less than 7,000 cybersecurity businesses, product vendors, I should say, not service providers, but products on Earth. Like, that's a pretty niche market out there. And so because we have chosen to niche down, and that's one of the areas that we're focused on, like you're showing, Jeremy, right here, we're able to actually create a lot of connections, just not even not even charging for that, but we're in a lot of the same conversations. So for example, earlier this year, a friend of mine was looking for new opportunities for marketing programs for their cyber business. I said, hey, last year I actually consulted with a business that runs actually a nonprofit in the cyberspace focused on training. And like, that's exactly who you really want to be getting in front of. In fact, because I know him, I'm going to call him right now, and I'm going to prep him for your email that I'm going to introduce you to on. And I'll make sure that you get like really like the best pricing, the best service you can possibly get. So I call that guy and I say, hey, I've got a client for you, right? I'm going to walk him right in the door. It's a small world. Here's kind of exactly what they do within the GRC space. And I think that they'd be perfect for you. I need you to be pretty aggressive with your pricing because I know how you price things sometimes. And you sometimes, as most entrepreneurs do, you kind of play with the price every once in a while and the packaging. I was like, here's exactly the price and the package that will get him to sign. So I was able to connect those two people almost like a matchmaker. I didn't make any money off of that. In fact, the one person spent it and the other person received it. But being in cyber and being in a small world like that, niching down, those types of connections are really added value. Right? Like, he didn't ask me to do that. And I just went out of my way to do it because frankly, it was easy because I knew these two people, and it's the cost of sending one text message to one of them, a phone call to the other, and then an email connection to the two. It costs them nothing. And so by niching down, I've got a truckload of stories just like that, where if I was working with everybody, I wouldn't really have those connections. And in return, continuing the same story, the guy who I sent the client to is actually at no cost asking me to attend a conference that he's creating. He's creating a conference that's going to be in the spring of 2025. And he's like, hey, tickets are, registration is a couple $1,000 and sponsorships are going for tens of thousands. Like, I would be happy. Like, I will extend you a free sponsorship at no charge to you. I'd love to have you come up here. Like, all you got to do is pay for your flight and your hotel. And I'm going to put you in front of people that now, again, in a small world of cybersecurity, I'm going to put you in front of people that are really hard to get hold of. But you're going to be in front of them face to face. I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to basically take their hand and your hand and put it like this and go, great, you two should talk. I'll see you later. And our experience was that when we weren't niched down, or even niche down in our second life into technology, which in the age we're in today, like every business is sort of a technology business to some degree or technology enabled. It just wasn't enough to make those types of connections and have those types of relationships. So it really supercharged our relationships with our clients and partners and friends in the industry.
I love that, Mike. And there's two things I kind of take out of that. One is obviously the power of a niche. And the second is just being as helpful as humanly possible to people, because of that, you're not looking to gain, but you're able to make those connections because you have a deep relationships in a specific niche. And then because there's people who have deep relationships in a niche, but they're also not necessarily looking to make those connections and being helpful to people too. So, that I always think about that. One of my favorite books, Brian Kurtz, Over Deliver, which is kind of, he's got this like 100-0, which is like, I just give as much as humanly possible and don't expect anything in return. Now, we both know what happens is when you give as much as humanly possible to someone, the right people want to help you as well, which it sounds like happened in that particular case.
100%. Yeah, I'm a big believer in reciprocity. It goes both ways. When someone helps me, I look for ways I can help him or her, in the future. And in the example again that I gave, I've already received in return, right? I'm getting this no cost sponsorship, attendance, to this very tight conference in terms of the attendees. It's not a large conference. It's going to be 300-400 people, like by design, like that, just the right 300-400 people. It also makes it so that, Gary Vee always talked about jab, jab, hook. When you do need something, and with this guy, I actually did need something. I was looking for an introduction to an investor that he had worked with in the past and raised some capital from years ago. When I mentioned the name, he was like, "Oh, that was like lifetimes ago." Like, yes, I know that guy pretty well. Why? Because I want to meet him. And if it's not too much to ask, I'm going to send you an email. Can you just push the forward button, put his name in the to line and hit send? I'm not asking you to write anything, just literally push forward, his name, send in Outlook, and you're done. And he's like, "Oh yeah, of course. Happy to do that." So I didn't know I was going to ask him for that down the line, but we can't predict the future. So eventually there will probably be something that person can do for you. And at that point you can ask, I use the word appropriate. Is it appropriate to ask you to do this? And if you say no, I respect that, of course. But if you don't have any objection, I would love if you would do whatever I'm asking you to do.
Yeah, I feel like we have very similar philosophies on this, Mike, because if someone's going to introduce me to someone, I like to call it the no work intro. Like I don't want you to do any work. You're already kind of doing enough by making an intro. So you sent them an exact email, literally just copy and paste it, or I would even say, "Hey, do you want me to reach out and just mention your name so you don't have to do anything?" And most of the time people are like, "No, I'm happy to send something," but you didn't make them do any extra work, because people oftentimes, because I sometimes make 5 to 20 introductions a day. And if someone sends me just an email, I can copy and paste. It's just so much easier, better. And I'm more likely to do it right away too.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned copy and paste. That used to be my go-to. And I was informed by a fellow kind of center of influence type person. If you've read Keith Barotzi, who talks about being a center of influence.
Never Eat Alone. Yeah. That's a great book.
Never Eat Alone. Yeah. That book's right there. That my friend who shares our same mindset actually said, copy and paste is now too much today. And I was like, "Are you
totally
sure?"
Get it. I like
just
the forward.
it's a couple clicks. And he's like, "You need to get into the forward game. Like they should literally push forward and nothing else. And this person should receive it, see the name, go, 'Oh, I know Dr. Jeremy.' Open. Well, it's an empty message. Oh, wait, no. I scroll down. Okay, there's the message. Like it should be that." I was like, "Are you sure, man? Like copy and paste is a couple clicks." And he's like, "It's too many clicks." He's like, "You got to do fewer clicks." I was like,
"I love that.
All right.
You got to be I need to get in the forward game. I'm way behind with the copy and paste." That's totally. So why cybersecurity and SaaS? So you go, okay, we're going to niche. You've been in this niche for a while. Why those niches? Because you kind of said off the bat, there's only 7,000. Well, I'm like, thinking, okay, why then?
Yeah. So cybersecurity in and of itself is too small, right? You're talking about 7,000 businesses, not all of whom are even in a position to hire a marketing agency, even if they wanted to, right? So like that kind of funnels down into a very focused number. And that's why we also work with SaaS businesses. If you look up I think I was on Statista or something last week. Globally, there's over 1 million software or SaaS businesses. Keep in mind that number accounts for like Mike created like a Firefox widget extension that helps you like find good prices on Amazon. Like, I mean, it's those all the way up to, you know, a huge Fortune 50 company or Fortune 100 company. And the reason we made the connections there is that the product delivery of a cybersecurity product is almost always, unless you're getting into physical security, which is kind of a subset of cyber and related, but not the same. It's almost always a SaaS delivery. Like you go to a computer terminal, and whether it's a web application or actually download like a physical desktop application on your machine, that's how you're actually accessing the product. And so when we looked at those two things, we noticed a lot of similarities. We also noticed some differences. And so for us, it was like cyber alone is too small. SaaS alone, frankly, is probably too big. But when you look at what they share in common, we do work with some startups, but it's generally more like mid-market and larger enterprises. And so what they all shared in common is long sales cycles, right? So they really need somebody that understands, hey, I'm not selling a pair of Nikes, right? I'm not Michael Jordan in the mid 90s where it's like people know they want them. They're lined up around the block to get into Foot Locker at 6 a.m. when it opens on a Saturday morning, you know, with the new shoe release. Like, you know, it's like a
We're
very
dating
transactional
ourselves
thing.
here with the Foot Locker, man.
I know. Yeah. I know some of your
I'm
listeners
with
might be
you.
like, what? So those long sales cycles, that's kind of our point of view of where we stand out is anything that has a long sales cycle, which is often a SaaS and or cybersecurity product. We work really well with those types of brands because they can't just do a bunch of bottom of the funnel lead generation, like hire a call bank and just dial for dollars. Like they won't get there on any of their revenue goals. They've got to have they have to have full representation from generating awareness to some consideration in their product, maybe even some trial. That's where, you know, like a trial or a demo request shows up, all the way down to like, okay, I am ready to purchase, and it's between you and you. And, you know, we just want our clients to be positioned through that decision process as really a leader in the process. So those long sales cycles, that's the common thing that they have is it's going to take a long time to close this deal, which also means that as an agency, if they're going to hire somebody, I always tell them, if you're not ready to commit a minimum of 6, but more like a minimum of 12 months to an agency at any price point, you shouldn't hire an agency. You can accomplish getting this work done other ways. But it's going to take a while. And I don't want you to look at our engagement 8 months in and go, you know, I was really thinking we'd have more closed won deals. And it's like, well, you know, it takes 8 months to close a deal. So really like at this point, you know, we're just now starting to get our deals that we're generating or influencing to the finish line. And by we, I mean, like we generated them and now your sales team is working them.
Yeah. Like we've definitely experienced that, you know, maybe it's a couple months in. Yeah, we haven't gotten any kinds of like, well, how long's your sales cycle? Oh, a year. I'm like, well, it's only 3 months. So, you know, maybe
Yeah.
that's why. But I like how you think about fit of a client.
Right.
They have a long sales cycle. What about from a size and personality perspective for you?
Yeah. Size of the business. We really shine and will show the most impact in an organization that's somewhere between 100 and 500 employees. And I use that word intentionally of showing the impact because they're just big enough where they can afford somebody like us. But they're not too big that there's so many things happening that it's hard to kind of show like, yeah, like I see your report that says you did these things, MKG, but also there's like, I got like a bunch of other vendors and internal team. Like I got a lot of people doing things all focused on helping this business grow. So 1 to 500 is awesome in terms of us not just doing strategy, but executing and activating that for you. When we get to working with the larger clients, you know, 1,000 to 5,000 employees, 5,000 plus, generally, I like to say that we're the tugboats steering that tanker ship through the harbor. They already have enough resources, and usually the problem statement they come to us with, and they never actually say it this way, but this is what they're saying. The problem statement is we have we have a lot of resources. We got capital and agencies and internal headcount and blah, 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 blah. We just kind of need to help steer it, right? So you think of it like a series of tugboats as a large ship, like a container ship is coming into a harbor. They've got the ropes on them. Like they're just there to make sure that for whatever reason, like the ship doesn't start veering too far in the wrong direction. So our counsel becomes really important for them at that point. And so it's just a different need and a different pain point based on the size of the organization. They like us to activate stuff, but frankly, they have enough people to execute on things that like they're not short on that. The only thing that all those clients agree on is that they don't have enough money or resources, which is awesome because it's like you're a 50-person company, a 500 and a 5,000, yet you all don't have enough time, money, or resources, which is interesting to us.
What about from a personality perspective?
Personality. Yeah. So we're looking for somebody that their personalities are generally, they are, I don't want to say aggressive, but they are motivated. They really enjoy building teams and managing teams. Like that's kind of our points of contact directly. And they also do a great job. The most successful client personalities for us are the ones that appropriately shield us from things we don't need to know or from taking flack that we oftentimes didn't deserve, right? It's really easy to throw like a vendor under the bus because they're external to the company. And we've had client experiences where we found out after the fact where it's like, oh, we took the hit on that one. We didn't know it, but there was an executive meeting and here's what came up. And by the way, our client just chucked us straight under the bus.
Was it because what's the scenario? Like, is the person worried about there's something going on in the company, they're worried about losing their job, so they place blame somewhere, or what's going on internally that when that happens typically?
Yeah, what's going on is usually a mistake has occurred or a number or like a target wasn't hit. And so the question usually comes on from the executive leadership team of like, okay, why do we think we didn't hit it? Or let's have a little bit of a retrospective here and discuss. And some ELT teams are a little bit more diplomatic than others. Some are more like, we didn't hit this. What the heck is going on around here? And others like truly want to make this a collaborative experience. So usually there's something that's not going right. And so that's what comes up, a number being missed, maybe an overspend. That's happened to us a few times. So as an example, we've done this multiple times over the years where we overspent on a client budget. And it wasn't actually always our fault because sometimes our clients, we found out after the fact through the change log and the ad platforms went in and made the change. And then they look at themselves and like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna get fired if they figured out that I just spent $10,000 more this month than I was supposed to. Well, MKG, like part of your statement of work is you do budget management on our paid ads accounts. So, hey, let me launch you straight under this bus. And I'll say this to listeners, we've always made it good with our clients, whether it was truly our fault or not. And there's been instances of both. We've just, out of the importance of the relationship, we've just made the client whole and said, you know what, we overspent by 10 grand, 10 grand's coming off your next bill. Or the 2,500 is going to come off your next 4 bills. Or like, we'll find a way to make you whole, but we want you to have the trust that like, if we put it into our statement of works and something goes wrong, we want you to trust that we're going to make it right.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And this kind of touches a little bit on, I'd love for you to talk about the triangle assessment.
Yeah. So our point of view, and this is relatively new for us. So you're getting it fresh. All the listeners are getting it, with all the bumps and the warts attached. We believe that when you're hiring an agency, it's like a triangle, right? So there's 3 points on it. The top point that is almost never talked about is, can a marketing agency even address or solve the problem that I'm asking them to do? Like, do we have some sort of confidence that that's even possible? Like, is this the right problem and will an agency be able to address it? The bottom left corner of the triangle is the agency itself. This is where everyone spends their attention, right? So they go out and they put together some sort of RFP or RFQ, whether it's formalized or not. They put it in writing. Here's what we're looking for. Here's our budget. Here's the things we expect you to do. Here's the things we need to see from you to evaluate you. So it's all about outwardly facing. Let me put together a list. I'm going to evaluate you. I'm going to whittle you down. And I'm going to pick one. That's where everyone focuses today. The other part of the triangle, the third corner, is also like the problem that never actually thought about by most clients. And that is, as the client, as the brand manager, whatever my title is, am I actually in a place to affect change to solve the problem at the top of the triangle? So you'd be surprised. We've been hired before and paid significant sums of money. And when it comes down to it, it's like, oh, by the way, like I'm not empowered as the brand manager to make these changes that are now critical to this program showing impact and success. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't, but it's that triangle is that point of view we're trying to share with folks as they're considering any kind of marketing agencies, which is, are you sure that this is the right problem and that agency can handle it? Are you sure that as a brand, you're ready and you're actually empowered and able to make the changes required within your organization? That gets tricky in larger matrix organizations because sometimes they do, and sometimes they find out after the fact they don't. And then the one that everyone thinks of in the triangle, that third corner is, okay, well, how am I going to find an agency? So for us, those three have to marry up, right? Like, are we the right agency for you? Are you going to be able to empower us? And collectively, can we work on this problem and affect change together? And that point of view really stops a lot of clients and makes them think. Some of them hate that thought process. And so I can see that we're clearly being, dismissed from the process. Others actually appreciate it. They're like, actually, no one's really framed this point of view before in a way that made me really think like, is this a good idea? And do I have some sort of structure to think about that?
What do you do at that point if they are not in a position to move forward? They've hired you. Do they just have to try and move it up the chain somehow, or wherever, maybe up, across, wherever it goes? What do you do in that situation?
Yes. Well, what we do, and this is new for us, and it's centered around a universal truth that we have found, which is all clients are liars. And we, as clients of other people, we lie, we inadvertently lie to our suppliers all the time. And I'm not trying to make us sound dishonest. It's just like these lies of omission, right? Like, oh, I left that out because I didn't know it was relevant to what you were working on, Jeremy. Oh, well, it is relevant. Let me tell you why. So I don't look at the clients pessimistically. I just know that like it takes time to work together so we can actually suss out all the details of what's happening. So what we're doing now, instead of signing, like most agencies will show up, they'll say, Jeremy, I'm going to send you a contract for 12 months. Or if you want to lock in the pricing, no cost of living increases, I'll send you a 24-month contract and you can sign that instead. What we're saying instead is we've got a triangle assessment, and that assessment answers, we're going to just do some work together for a couple of weeks. And in that couple of weeks, we'll understand, is this a problem that can be solved by a marketing agency like us? Are we the right marketing agency? And are you right for the problem and us? Like, is this triangle going to get lines drawn between the 3 points? Or are we going to have like some holes in our triangle? And so the outcome of that is the first finding is, yes, the marketing that we do at MKG will solve this problem, and we feel confident that we can do this together. So yes, we should move ahead, and this is what moving ahead looks like. The other outcomes are one of those 3 points is off. So say the client and the problem are right, but we're the wrong agency. Hey, no harm, no foul. Like, this was a 2-week exercise. You didn't lose a whole bunch of time and energy here. You didn't spend a lot of money doing this. And I'm actually going to introduce you to somebody who I think is now that we really know what's going on, I'm going to introduce you to somebody. I'd like you to sign an NDA with them so we can disclose the findings from our triangle assessment. And as painful as it is for me to say, they're better than we are at what you need. But that's the honest truth. What doesn't happen very often is the client is the problem. But it does happen, right? Looking at an assessment like this, we understand, hey, for whatever reason, like, you are not in an empowered spot, so you really shouldn't hire us or anybody else, because this problem is not going to get impacted in the way that you want. In fact, it's probably going to balloon, and then you're going to have the expense of hiring us.
It makes me think of, my background I guess I'm a recovering chiropractor, Mike. So people come and I have no idea why my back is hurting, right? And then I discover, well, 6 months ago I tore my ACL, so I've been limping, I've been on crutches, and then I said, all these things. Oh, I didn't think that was. They just don't know. Like, I didn't think that was related to my back. I'm like, well, yeah, you've been hobbling around on crutches and whatever it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, it totally messes up your back. So it's not on purpose, but yeah, it's like sometimes the connections aren't made there. I totally relate to that. And I've done the same. I've left stuff out of a doctor's appointment. Like, oh, I didn't think that was relevant at all to what I'm talking about. But they're like, no, Jeremy, it definitely is. So I love that piece. So I could see the niche part, Mike. I want to talk about the evolution of your role and how it's changed. So
Yep.
take us back to the beginning of the agency. What did that look like? And then we can kind of, hit some of the high points of how your role has changed.
Sure. So as you can probably imagine, having been in business for yourself and a lot of your audience is entrepreneurs as well, um, you know, our first cat life was me doing everything. Me and my business partner kind of just running around. We were doing our own marketing. We were selling, taking sales calls. We were doing the work. We were building out the KPI reports. It was just everything. Um, and so I think calling it an individual contributor is probably an understatement. It's just like you are the only contributor. So you are contributing or you die. Now, in the second stage, once we started really the second life of our cat lives, we started focusing on just tech companies in general. What we did at that point is we actually we were in front of a whiteboard. We wrote down every client we'd ever worked with and what we did for them, just at a high level, like SEO, web design, PR, backlinks, podcasting, whatever. And then we went through that whole list and we used color coded markers. Red is not good, green is good. I think we had a yellow in there, which is like, we're not so sure about this. Um, Undecided. And we actually just color code circled all the services we did and the types of clients we did them for. Because before we started focusing on tech clients, we were working with nonprofits, food. We worked with a pet food company. Man, I can tell you so much about like fishing for tuna in Thailand and how it gets into your cat's, can of food. Like, it's embarrassing the amount of cat food info that I know to this day. Um, and so we circled in green. Here's the types of companies we actually performed really well for. So not who we subjectively felt like they were cool companies or we thought it was fun. It was like, who do we actually move the needle for? Circle, circle, circle. And then what do we do for them? Circle, circle, circle. And that's how we got into doing SEO and paid ads for tech companies. And at that point, we had a small team. It was still, as Jeff Bezos would call it, like a one pizza team. We were probably 6 or 7 people in total. So you get an extra large pizza maybe from Costco, and you could feed that whole team with that. And from there, I started to transition more into, well, what is, like Vern always talks about, what does working on the business look like to you? And that was a pretty scary thing to go from a whole contributor to now I need to like trust and empower some other team members to just do really good work and kind of, support them in that effort. But they need, for them to continue to have paychecks, like we need a steady flow of new leads, and I need to go to a conference and network every once in a while. And I need to understand like business finances so that we can actually be in a strong financial position. So it really started to force me to work on things of which I was never professionally trained. And frankly, had very little academic training too. People always ask if I go back to college, like undergrad, what would I take more of? And I always say economics. I was like, I wish I took econ classes. I avoided them because they were hard and people got low grades on them. And I was like, they're just going to ding my GPA. I don't need that. And in hindsight, I'm like, the GPA like doesn't matter compared to what I probably would have learned in an academic setting that I'm now catching up on years after the fact. And then transitioning into the niche that we're in now, we really decided like, are we for all tech companies, or do we tend to work with some over others. And so my role, we run EOS, Gino Wickman was part of the whole EO and Burn tribe there. So as an owner visionary seat, it's my responsibility to do a little bit of visioning. And I say a little bit because somebody wise once told me, for any non-large corporations, the amount of visioning you need to do is pretty minimal. Like don't overestimate the amount of work you need to do here. You're not Mark Zuckerberg thinking about making smart clothing connected to your Facebook account or WhatsApp or whatever. Like you're just not, and that's okay. You can get there one day, but like Mark Zuckerberg needs to really think about that kind of stuff. You need to think about what do your clients really need. And as an example, I was like, well, the clients that we work best with are long sales cycles. They tend to be within tech, SaaS, and cybersecurity. And now, even today, this is 5 years after we made that niche decision. Now we're thinking about the point of view of our offering of like, well, how would you go about hiring somebody like us? Not just us, but like us. And that's where the triangle assessment came from, because there's so many false starts and the price of getting it wrong, because all your prospective clients are going to lie to you, and you're going to lie to them too a little bit. You're going to omit some things. It's just going to happen as you get to know each other and get more comfortable. That triangle assessment is how we think the future of what an engagement should look like. You shouldn't agree to spend $100,000 immediately. You should spend a fraction of that to understand if you should spend 100 behind that. And if I can spend a fraction, tell you it's a bad idea, you can take that capital and invest it elsewhere in your business. And I think that's really like where we're going right now and what I'm working on. And I think I've demonstrated is like something that in the first cat life of our business, I never would have even cared to think about. In the second cat life, might have started to think about, but probably not a whole lot. And in this life, we're like, oh, this is really like where my attention needs to be right now.
How did you meet your co-founder?
We worked together at an ad agency in Seattle. So we were actually coworkers. She was actually my boss. She was brought in, and we worked together for about a year at that agency before we both decided to try doing our own thing.
What was that conversation like? I'm wondering, she's like, I'm going to start my own thing. Do you want to join me? Were you just, hey, I think we should start our own thing? What was the conversation like early on?
Yeah, the conversation it was so informal.
It was like Jerry Maguire, where she's like, I'm fired. Take Mike. You're coming with. No.
Yeah, I know everybody. All the lines are full. I can still see the phone in that scene of Jerry Maguire where Tom Cruise is trying to call everybody. So this scene, it was very casual, and we were just talking one day, and she was like, "Have you ever thought about like what if we could do this kind of on our own and set our own terms, not just from a work standpoint, but from a what we're going to do standpoint?" And we started talking about it more and more, and we got to this point of, hey, why don't we try this out? She quit that company into this full time. I did it nights and weekends, and that was our agreement of like nights, weekends. Like I would be more of like an operations type guy, like operating things, pulling levers. And that was our agreement. We said, let's go 6 months. If we don't get any clients, great. If we get a client, we can review at that point of like, how big is the client? Could this sustain both our lives at this point?
Kind of like a test run.
Yeah, totally. And it was about 2 months in that we got our first client, and she hates selling. She actually landed our first client through a referral, a friend of a friend who ended up subbing out some work to us from their agency to us. And I still remember we got a check for $30,000, and I thought we were the richest men and women in Babylon. I was like, $30,000 is an exorbitant amount of money. Like, we have taken these folks to the cleaners. There's nowhere they financially recover from this check they're about to write us. The company that wrote it is called Box. They were called Box.com at the time. They dropped the .com, and so they were competing with Dropbox and focused on huge, file sharing, security, that kind of stuff. And I'm sure when they wrote us that check, they probably, like, we agreed to the terms, and we were super excited. We left all like that. And I'm sure that as soon as we were out of earshot, they're like, oh my gosh, we just like hosed these guys. They have no idea how much we were willing to pay. And the number that they gave us is like, yeah, we'll do that. Sounds good.
It's a win-win, right?
Yeah, it was a fantastic first logo to have. And it was at a time when they were really ascending. They weren't at the startup phase of we have to be responsible adults. They were at the startup phase of everyone loves us. VCs are trying to literally throw money at us. Like they'll drive by our office and throw briefcases of cash. I mean, it was fun. Like a couple of years into working with them, the fun stopped and the adults showed up because there's a lot of money involved. But when we started with them, they were just like the darling of Silicon Valley startups. They were just so popular. So then anytime I mentioned Box, people are like, whoa, like they gave you, they let you do some stuff. They gave you some money. Of course, Box would do that.
I notice, on the site, Carrie is owner CEO and you're owner visionary, right? So I'd love for you to talk about the CEO visionary journey a little bit from your standpoint. And the
Yeah, for
people, I
those,
just want to mention, you mentioned Gino Wickman. I have an episode with Gino Wickman. I have an episode with Mark Winters. Mark Winters and Gino Wickman wrote Rocket Fuel. So anyways.
yeah, we we discovered EOS about 6 years ago, and the accountability chart that exists there. If y'all aren't familiar with it in the audience, just look up accountability chart in the letters E, O, and S, and you'll find out what I'm talking about. The accountability chart of visionary and integrator. So I was the visionary, and my title was CEO. Yet I was also responsible for all of finance. And
Isn't that like
he
a
was the
C? Isn't that
integrator.
a visionary's kryptonite?
It is not where finance should live. It's just not. So I was doing sales and finance, and she was doing operations like client service and marketing. So you can already tell that within the accountability chart and the three functions of a business within an accountability chart, it's like we kind of took them and just split them in half and gave half to one another. And it actually was during a free consultation with an EOS implementer. He was asking us some questions, and he's like, do you realize that you actually kind of conflagrated this whole thing and you gave each other, like, Mike, you took some integrator stuff, and Carrie, you do some visionary stuff. And he was like, and then he started asking about that, Carrie, how does it make you feel that like Mike knows a lot more about finance than you? And she's like, well, frankly, like, I wish that I knew more, but it's really his lane. I try and respect that. And I'm also so busy over here that I don't really have time to check Mike's work. And I had a very similar answer where I was like, I mean, marketing connects to sales and, big relationships. That's kind of a big job task of a visionary is what kind of big relationships do you foster over time? I was like, I kind of like wish that I knew more that was going on with marketing, but like Carrie just kind of does marketing things and I just do the selling. And he's like, don't you think those should be more attached? Even if you are not doing the marketing like with your own hands, like, shouldn't you be more involved in that? And he asked a lot of questions that were at the time frustrating. And so we ended up rewriting our accountability, spots. And I took owner visionary. She's owner CEO. Being the CEO is really important to her. And for me, I was like, the CEO title doesn't do a lot for me that the owner or founder title wouldn't also do for me. So that's kind of how we ended up splitting those two things.
Thanks for sharing that. There's a good episode I did with Dan Zawacki, who started Lobstergram, and now after he sold it, he became an EOS implementer. Do you know Dan?
No, but the
Oh,
word
okay.
lobstergram is funny.
Oh, exactly. Okay. Dan the Lobster Man. Yeah. So he sent live lobsters in the mail. And I think at one point they talked to him on Howard Stern and Oprah and all these places early on. So it's a fun interview. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about mentors, right? We talked about EO, we talked about,
Mhm.
you've learned from a lot of different people and maybe a few of your mentors and maybe a piece of advice they've given you.
Sure. I still to this day don't have a single mentor that I look up to, like a one person. I know some entrepreneurs do. They can point to that one guy or girl who's like, I value this person more than anyone else. I treat it like running back by committee. If you'll take the football example, there are certain people that I look to as mentors. The first one that I look at is a guy named David C. Baker. He's a former agency owner. Now he runs a consultancy. He's out of Tennessee, the state of Tennessee. I just think he's an incredibly clear thinker, and he writes. And he's published quite a few books. He's such an art. The way he articulates his thoughts and his experience is just, it's unlike a lot of other people that I've ever come across. There are other kind of agency consultants and mentors out there, but I've never quite seen anyone like David. And I really value and look up to him. And as soon as this episode publishes, I'm going to send it to him so he knows he gets some props. The other person that I really enjoy, I'd say two of them. The Phil Knight story, if you've read Shoe Dog,
It's a great book.
it's just an incredible story of like how he went from being effectively a reseller of Japanese running shoes to like starting Nike. And I see a lot of similarities between Phil and Richard Branson. And Richard Branson's early books, like Screw It, Just Do It, things like that. I will argue, Richard, if you ever hear this podcast, that you regurgitate a lot of your stories across your books. Like, I don't see a lot of original content these days. Like, I need something new, man. That's my only beef with you. But I like those two because they're just, while they will roll up their sleeves and using EOS language, they can be the integrator and the bottle washer and the everything. They think at such a high level, or they used to. I mean, they're now in positions more like in chairman type roles, so they don't need to do that type of thinking anymore. But in getting their business ventures, the whole Virgin Empire getting started by Richard, Nike getting started by Phil, they were thinking at such a high level, and they made certain bets, like betting the whole shoe division on Michael Jordan. Insane at the time. Like, he was popular, but he's nowhere near what he became. And so I really like just the adventurous part of it, the playful part of Richard Branson. And I really value the exercise work, the ethics, or the work ethic around exercise for Phil Knight. Because he was always said that when he was really working over a problem at Nike, he'd go for a run. So I'd be like, "Where's Phil? Like, is he in his office?" Like, he strapped on his trainers, and like, we haven't seen him for 2 hours. Like, I don't know where he's, somewhere in the state of Oregon, because he couldn't have gotten that far, but like, where in Oregon, like, I can't tell you. Because he's thinking that through problems. And I look up to people that use physical movement and motion and as a way to cope and to think. And I look up to people like Richard, who just have crazy high ambitions across a number of industries.
Mike, first of all, I want to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey and your stories. This is super fascinating. I want to encourage people to check out, you can check out MKG Marketing Inc. inc.com to learn more. You've seen it on there, and more episodes of the podcast. And just, Mike, thank you. And we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.